Hello, everyone, and welcome to How to Talk About Anti-Black Racism, Part 3. My name is Audrey Hudson, and I'm the Richard and Elizabeth Curry Chief of Education and Programming here at the Art Gallery of Ontario. I will begin the program with the land acknowledgement. The land that the AGO is on is Michi-Sagig Anishinaabe Territory, Mississaugas, and it is also governed by a treaty between the Mississauga of the Credit and the Canadian government. Toronto is Michi-Sagig Anishinaabe territory, and it has also been occupied by other Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Wendat confederacies. Ontario continues to be home to many Indigenous people who live alongside settlers, newcomers, and people whose ancestors were enslaved across the Americas and the Caribbean. Thank you for joining me today. So I am joined for this conversation with community members, artists, educators, teachers, and activists. And I will go around, I think everyone's here on screen now with me. I will go around and we'll do introductions. All right. More at length bios are in the chat function and also on our on the AGO's website. All right, so let's begin. So I'll just go in order on my screen. Maybe perhaps I can call on people. Good. All right. Oh, there's yeah. All right. So Emmanuel, let's start with you.
Everybody, my name is Emmanuel Tabi. I'm an assistant professor at McGill University, specifically in Black and African studies. And I'm excited to be here and have this conversation again. Audrey, thank you for organizing this and for all the great work you do, and to be in the room with such amazing folks. Again, super stoked to be here. Yeah, a little bit about myself. I was a spoken word poet for 14 years. I'm also a multi-instrumentalist as well as an academic. So yeah, this is an important conversation. I'm interested to see how it goes. There's a lot of emotion in the room. And yeah, so thank you.
Thanks. Frida?
Hello, everyone. My name is Frida Bizimana. I am a social worker by day and singer-songwriter by night. I just completed my master's in social work at the University of Toronto. My biggest passion is music, but I also am motivated by creating a space for Black youth to express themselves, and I do that in my therapy as well as in my music. So I'm excited to be here today. And thank you, Audrey, for allowing me to be here. And I'm looking forward to the conversation and learning from all of you.
Thank you. Sam?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Audrey, for convening us on this important conversation. My name is Sam. I'm an assistant professor in sociology, and I work with Success Beyond Limits, which is a community organization in Jayda Finch. So really happy to kind of convene and share with you all. So thanks for having me.
Thank you. Joy?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Joy Martyr-Andre. I am a visual artist and educator with the Toronto District School Board, and I too am thankful that this group has been brought together and look forward to learning from everyone in this space.
Thank you. Lori?
Good morning, everybody. My name is Lori Townsend, and I am a 20-plus year teacher in middle school with TDSB, currently on a leave of absence. I'm also a filmmaker, and I'm in post-production on on a feature documentary film titled Away with Words. Between filmmaking and teaching, my love for storytelling and working with young people, that's really what brings me joy, and I'm really grateful for this opportunity to talk about the strategies that I've used in the past, because we've been here before, as we're going to talk about. We've been here before in this position of needing to help our young people make sense of their world, and so I have a number of strategies that I'm hoping that we can talk about. I'd love to share, and yeah, I'm just really grateful for this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. And Brandon, hi.
Good morning, folks. My name is Brandon Hay. Um, uh, yeah, a lot of emotions, a lot of feeling, big feels this morning. And So I'm the founder of the Black Daddies Club. I'm the father of three boys, three beautiful black boys. In the day, I'm a community development officer with the City of Toronto, within SDNFA. Within the youth development unit, and support the community healing project as well as support for parents and caregivers of MVP youth. And I just completed my third year at the Gestalt Institute um, of Therapy. So lots of gratitude to Audrey as well as this esteemed panel and the folks who showed up um, for this conversation.
Mhm. Thank you, everyone. And the last two conversations that we had, part one and part two, Mosa McNeilly was joining us. She sends her love today. She's actually in a classroom, and sends her regrets. And then also Quentin VerCetty. He's actually grieving quite. It's a little bit too fresh for him right now, and so again, he sends his love to all of us, and then also into the world. And I'm just so honored that you all said yes to being on this third panel series. The initial one was born in response to the George Floyd murder on May 26, 2020. And today, because there was a racially motivated act of hate in the supermarket in Buffalo, New York, here we are again. And 10 people's lives were taken just too early. And if we think about it, they were out getting groceries, period, buying a birthday cake and getting food to nourish one's body. They were aunties, they were uncles, they were parents, they were daughters, they were sons, grandparents, neighbors, and friends. So let's think about that as we move into the conversation. I convene this panel again to delve into how do we really have these tough conversations with the young people that we all work with on the screen and that you all work with even in the audience. These are there's a lot of emotion in it, and so how do you convey what is actually happening without sugarcoating anything at all, being really honest in these conversations, because young people deserve honesty. And so the first question is, and we can go around and however we want to answer the question, but how do you explain anti-Black racism to young people you work with? And how can the arts, so the visual art, music, drama, dance, etc., be an entry point into those conversations? And I'll open up the floor to anyone who wants to start us off.
I can begin. Sorry, Joy. By saying that story can be a balm. It can be it creates a container and a space that allows for some distance from the trauma, particularly when it's a story that is being told from a different perspective. And I've just found in the classroom that picture books and no matter the age that I'm teaching, picture books can be a really great starting point for having difficult and hard conversations, because first of all, they're usually, they're written in simple format, but we know that we're dealing with, different levels of the emotional lives of characters. And so what I always turn to in the drama classroom in particular are picture books as a starting place, where we understand that the plot, we're introduced to a character, and we have the opportunity to have students retell the story, or reimagine the story, or reimagine an ending, and then that way you're really inviting students to use their imaginations, right? And again, it's within this safe context of not having to discuss their own trauma or whatever this event might have triggered for them. Because we can't forget, like I've taught in places where, you know, there's been a shooting in the community, you know, within the community that adjacent to the school. And, you know, the next day we're dealing with something that's happening on, like, you know, more of a global scale. And I mean, just the compounding of those traumas, and it's a lot. So that's one thing. I mean, and the drama classroom, by definition, at least in my experience, has always been a place first where you see each other. You have to have a certain amount of trust because there's so much going on in terms of risk taking. And so all of those things are already kind of present before we enter into experiences where we're deconstructing, you know, a story or retelling a story in a dramatic way. A lot of the groundwork has been done already because we have to do that on day one in order to even feel safe to, you know, to take the risks that are important. So drama definitely for me has been the key area of the curriculum where a lot of difficult conversations and a lot of healing happens. And so, yeah, picture books are great. I have a couple of resources that I go to, The Conscious Kid, and I'll put that in the chat. theconsciouskid.org has book lists that it lists these picture books by theme. And so you can find examples of, you know, young protagonists, fictional protagonists who are in situations where they're helping. That's another thing I wanted to mention. You know, I really love that quote. I think it's Mr. Rogers, who talks about looking for the helpers, you know, in situations. Let me find it. I don't want to botch the quote. Oh yeah, he says, when I was a boy, I would see scary things in the news. My mother would say to me, look for the helpers. You'll always find people who are helping. And that's something that I feel like, you know, we can do with young people as well. Behind the sensational headlines and the scary headlines, I look for stories about the helpers or the heroes or the people who did, you know, courageous things, and those are often the subjects of those storybooks as well. So you can make a connection between something that's happening, a scary thing that's happening in the real world, and you know, the heroics of a protagonist in a picture book, and you can go from there. Anyway, I'll put the Conscious Kid, and the other one is Social Justice Books .org.
Great. Thank you, Lori. Yeah. A lot of good resources. Great. And Joy, I think you wanted to go ahead.
And I definitely agree with you, Lori, about the arts, right? The arts is your entry point into having these discussions. And you can use that again in every course. But when you ask this question, what it made me think of is I currently have the pleasure of teaching a course that was developed by 4 TDSB teachers. And they deserve a call out. Their names are Tiffany Barrett, D. Tyler Robinson, Remy Basu, and Kirsten Winter. And they developed a course that we now are calling Deconstructing Anti-Black Racism. And one of the most valuable conversations I think we had in the beginning of the course, pre-colonial Africa, when we spoke about the kings and queens, one of the most valuable conversations we had after was, and part of it was imagining, but this conversation about coming from pre-colonial Africa to, or actually moment of enslavement to segregation. And that's huge, right? Like, how do you even begin to have this conversation that spans all these hundreds of years? But what it allowed students to do is it allowed them to start to stitch together some of the threads of history that have created these situations that are happening today. So we had focused on, you know, that saying that yesterday's injustice becomes today's inequality. So some of these questions that I had asked them was, you know, in thinking of the impacts of enslavement, what do you think Africa as a nation lost? You know, starting there, and these huge, huge, huge questions, but allowing them the opportunity to think of what that might look like without any real research, you know, opportunity to research it. Just think about it. And so those questions grew and developed. I have, you know, when colonizers left, what was left behind? Just imagine, let's make a list, you know, that sort of thing. In the Americas, you know, thinking about the practice of slavery, what had to be the mindset of those who engaged in this horrific act, and what values were created as part of a society who engaged in this. And again, just the responses of students, for them to think about what's happening now and, you know, trace it back to, okay, some of these values were, and then this list of values, and more likely than not, they were pretty bang on, in the sense that they were able to have the conversation about, like, if a nation has determined that you are free, what does that look like, right? What does that mean? You know, what had to happen, right? What happened to the mindset and the, you know, that had of a community that instilled these values that allowed them to demean Black people, and then how did that impact the people themselves? And being free, what did that mean? What did that look like? What did that feel like? If, you know, at a point, Black folks were allowed to enter into society, right? Re-enter into society and be free people, what does it look like? And such a valuable conversation, because students were able to share in their understanding, you know, at 17, what they felt that looked like. But what it did do is it allowed them to develop it. And then, of course, we solidified it with fact, right? Through fact. But I was able to take them through this journey through imagery, right? Through sketches. We know that so much has been documented. Through photography, right? We know that so much has been documented. When you put up that photo of, you know, the segregated water stations right here, that happened right here in Canada, and have that conversation. Okay, look at that. How did we get here? And it's huge. I mean, that conversation was like a good 4-day conversation, right? It carried on, and students came active, ready to have that conversation every day, so that they can begin to thread together those pieces of history that have created what we see today. Providing, you know, themselves and us providing them with a deeper understanding of how embedded this hate is. I mean, they're witnessing it, you know, in social media, but they're witnessing it in their own spaces, in school spaces, right? They are challenged by acts of anti-Black racism, and they are encouraged to do, like, amongst the student body, they're encouraged to do something about it. And a lot of that, I find that you know, that engaging their hearts and engaging their minds, you know, I find that all of that comes from, again, understanding that deep history going back. It's not surface. They see why this is happening, and they see how it's embedded in institutions, and how, you know, this understanding of what white supremacy is, that it's not just a word, but what it actually means, and how it's embedded in the institutions and social systems that they are a very part of. Right? And then they see these acts and they understand what's behind it, and are motivated to do more than just, you know, say, this is bad, right? This incident is traumatic. Yes, it's all of that. But what do we do? Motivation to act, right? So I found that, yeah, that was a really valuable conversation in terms of having them thread together some of these reasons why. There is no why, but you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I just want to, I think that for myself, I just want to sort of say, like, you know, I really want to be hopeful. But in moments like these, it's like, it's hard to be. And I'm going to speak from the lens from a Black father, you know, and of 3 sons. I think that's always a difficult piece, right? Like in terms of with like my friends who are parents, are non-Black parents, like there's the conversations they have, like the shared conversations we have around the birds and the bees, so to speak. But then there's certain conversations I have to have with my sons that they don't have to have, like how to respond to police, or, you know, this vibe of like, you know, in this program at Gestalt, there's a big emphasis of getting into your body. And I know I live in my head a lot. And going into my body as a Black man hasn't always been safe. And in the case of the folks who got shot on Sunday, it's like folks are just because they're targeted, just because these folks are Black, like that was enough in their bodies. And I think that the powerful for me was the fact of like seeing that white manager on the ground, and then the guy said sorry and just moved on. It was just like, fuck, like, but to answer your questions, I think for myself, what's one of the tools that I've used in terms of the arts have been like movies. And I've talked about queerness and Blackness with my sons, watching Moonlight and having a debrief. Even last night, I was watching Atlanta with my youngest son, season 3, episode 1, and it's like a teachable moment afterwards, and like sort of debrief around like, what are your takeaways, you know? And I remember after the George Floyd incident, and I asked my eldest son, like, what's your take? And he was just like, it's like the purge, but it's only Black people that's being eradicated. And I think for me, it's having these conversations, but sometimes I don't have the answers or how to respond, because I'm like equally impacted, you know? Like I know when I saw Eric Garner being choked out, like I was like, is this real? I think when I see these things each time, when I saw that thing at the growth, I'm like, is this a video game? Like it wasn't computing. And when I saw Eric Garner being choked out, it just wasn't computing. And I think I see myself on those screens, and to reinforce my sons to be like, yeah, you're Black and beautiful, and to go out there. But I'm fucking scared. I'm scared for myself, but I'm scared for them. And there's this overprotectiveness that I have with them. And then on the contrast to that, I see, you know, white folks being able to like storm the Capitol building, and there was a different lesson that their parents were teaching them, that they're like, yo, you can take whatever, you can overthrow, and you can you can chase after police officers, where that's a total different narrative than I teach my Black sons, which is sometimes feels almost like a place of like, you know, go to school, learn, and sort of hide. And it feels fucked up to really say that. You know what I'm saying? And I think music sometimes has been a teachable moment. I know, like if I'm taking my son to track practice or ball practice or wherever, and I hear my son singing a song along, I'm just like, okay, let's pause for a moment. What is he saying? Let's break down the lyrics. I think those is how I've used media. Maybe right, maybe wrong, but you know, just in terms of being able to go with this answer. But I'll pause there and pass it to the next person.
I could just really. Oh, sorry, Audrey.
No, I was just going to say thank you. That's it. No, please go ahead.
I would just say really quickly. I mean, I think I come at this as both like a teacher, community worker, sociologist, and I start with the idea that the young people that I get the opportunity and chance to work with, they give me anytime. I start with what they see, what they see in their neighborhoods, what they see when they interact in the world. And they already know. So I'm tapping into something they already know. Yeah. I begin there. And I get them to try to think like everyday sociologists and observe how they move in the world, whether they're Black, they're white, they're racialized, they're indigenous, and understand that what we saw in Buffalo, or all of the incidences before, or how we move in the world, is part of the current world system. Like this is part of it. This is how the world was constituted, that Canada was made in this image, right? So I think that idea, so then the way that your neighborhood is arranged, the way that your school looks, the way that other schools look, the way that our families try to make lives for ourselves, and who has to work what kind of jobs when, who has to line up at the, the cash money spot at the first of the month. Why do our apartments look the way they do? All of those, I think, are entryways for me to think about how anti-Black racism or white supremacy or barriers that have been put in place, continually put in place to block our own full lives is part of what's been happening to Buffalo. So I think that any educators, if you're not teaching a critical anti-Black lens, after this weekend, it's a tough place to start. Yeah, a whole like white supremacist racial massacre. It's a tough place to start that conversation. But if that doesn't thrust us into beginning to think about how we do that, I don't know what will. And then lastly, I just taught like these kind of intro to sociology, second year, third year courses this year, and you have to think about great replacement theory or white flight or white fears of minority takeover as being part and parcel of the Canadian nation state. Like this is our country, right? So the history of immigration has always been about maintaining a whiteness at the heart of the country. They've always tracked how many Black folks or Indigenous people, they've always counted our bodies in this country. So we need to also understand that what happened in Buffalo is also something that's entirely possible and has been happening north of the border. So that, and then if in any classes I frequent, we touch that lesson, we touch that. So then it becomes that when something like this happens, we're already starting from a place of at least common and shared understanding, right? Because this is such a difficult place to start to try to have these conversations with your students. But we've been talking about this, at least, some of us, we've known each other for a while since we've started teaching. So that then we have this place with our students to know when something like this happens, we can start from there, because these are definitely conversations and we need to have them. So.
Thank you.
No, I completely agree with everything everyone has said. And as I said before, there's a lot of emotion in the room, and like, think about what Brandon's saying. Like I have two Black boys, right, at home, and my older one and my wife a few weeks ago were just walking to the playground, and at the playground, a group of young teenagers surrounded them and started calling them niggers. Right? So like the things that we're seeing, like just on a Saturday afternoon, you're going to play on the slide and you want to go play on the slide and that's it. Right? And so it's like that energy of preparing your kid for this, right? Like this is happening with your parent there. What's going to happen when he's out there with his friends and such, right? And these are the realities. And the most frustrating thing, right? And like we continue to have these conversations and I think they're important, but there's still that energy where so many of us are still in a position where we're explaining this to people, right? Like playing off what Sam was just saying, right? When like we live in a white supremacist world, right? Everything was built along these lines. Our bodies were scaled along, these realities, right? Our bodies were socially constructed, right? So you look like this and you're placed in this situation. And you look another way and you're placed in another situation. And it feels like sometimes like we're banging our heads against the wall. And even for my students, a lot of them have become very, very numb. Like, like in class, they wouldn't say much, but what's really been cool is in their journals, they have shared so much, right? And also folks being afraid sometimes to speak up in class because they don't want to say the wrong thing. And for the guest lectures I've brought in both Black and white activists to speak to my students. And I think I'd say about 95% of my students were white, right? And hearing another white person talk about some of these things did have an impact on them that I've seen before. But it's like, there's so much to say, and then it's like that energy, like no matter how clever our arguments are or how emotional we are, it's the realities are like it's just completely going over folks' head, right? And it continues to happen, and I'm fighting personally like a lot of at times that same numbness, right? When seeing this, because I've said before, um, it's not like preparing for like if it happens to your kids or those that you care about or you care for, it's when, right? And all of us here have lived in our bodies our entire lives, and we all have like you meet people you don't know, and you all have similar stories, right? Because we live in this same similar society, this similar ideology, right? That continues to be played out. It's like, is there an armor that I just want to put my kids in a bubble sometimes, right? And here in Montreal, like there was a black kid stabbed at school, and he was taunted by kids online before and after he was killed, right? And other kids, and they, you know, like it's, you know, Google the investigation. The investigation itself was pretty frustrating, right? Where the kids are saying they know who did it and there are no arrests made and so on and so forth. So what it's communicating to young folks about what their worth is, right? What is it communicating to them about what their worth is? So if this happens to another community or another person in a different body, we know the outcome, right? And it happens to us, and we know what the outcome is going to be, and then we're just left with this thing, right? And it's passing from generation to generation to generation, right? And so many different folks deal with it differently. You know, I think what's heartbreaking is in Buffalo is watching the children of one of the ladies that was murdered, and watch their emotion and talking about, you know, like we quote unquote did everything right. I grew up with a mom who was a pastor, so it's like you got to pray for these people and stuff like that. And it continues, right? And they're like, we did all these things and we're still in this place. Like, what do we have to do? And there's not really an answer for them. It's just that question that just lingers on, and it's a question that's been asked for so many generations, right? And where is it leaving us? It's yeah, like it's more so like how do we heal, right? But this injury keeps happening, right? That scab keeps on getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and the longer I live in this world, the more difficult it is to have hope. Obviously there's hope because we see, you know what, those that have gone before us, the work they've done and allowing us to be here and having this conversation. But the work our kids are going to have to do, right? And as a parent, like you want to protect them, and you want to make a space for them so they could kind of be kids for as long as possible. But I don't know, it makes me think about parenting too, like, right? Like what is the right thing? Do we prepare them now, or do we allow them to enjoy their innocence now? I don't know, but it's yeah, I don't know. I'm figuring this out as an educator as well and a parent. Yeah, so yeah, that's what I'm thinking right now.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just
Freda?
wanted to say, yeah. Yeah, definitely the numbness or feeling numb, that's me all the time. You know, after George Floyd's murder, I had to get off social media for like a while. Even now, if I didn't really watch or like read anything till recently, but till the other day, but it was hard for me. I was running. I remember I was running on the treadmill. I was seeing on the news at the gym, and I was just like, I was just like, put my headphones on, put the music up, and I was like, nope, not right now. You know, it's just, I'm tired. I'm tired. Like I'm tired of having to have these conversations, And within the same time, like, sometimes I do this and I wouldn't recommend it all the time, but I go through comments, on certain videos, and I see the world we live in. Like, you really get to see how some people, what they have to say. And I'm like, holy, bye. I gotta go. Like, I gotta get out of this, because I'm like, this is real life. Okay. And it's scary. And so as I work with my youth, so I work with Black youth in conflict with the law. I've been doing that for about 4 years. And I've had youth tell me straight up, like, yo, you're damn if you do, you're damn if you don't. Like, if I stop doing what I'm doing, they're still gonna think I'm doing it. So what's the point? Not, they have no self-confidence. Like, what the world already sees me as a failure, as this, that, as a criminal, as I'm, not gonna amount to anything. I'm not even gonna go to college. So that's that. And so what I try to take on is just to provide that, to be that light, or to just motivate them to, just focus on their strengths, and really, show them that you can do, what you are set or destined to do. But the same breath, it's hard to say, like, it's just that easy. It's an easy path. Like, there you go, just go this, da. No, there's obviously obstacles along the way. And these are the conversations that we have. A biggest thing, as Sam said, like, just starting from where they're at, or what they've experienced thus far. And that's exactly, the approach that I take as well, because they see this. They've seen this from a very young age, 7, 6. They see it. They know that they're being treated differently in school. That's the biggest thing in schools. I've had youth say, like I said, have you experienced racism? And sometimes I'm like, no. But then when we start talking about, their experiences in school, they'll be like, well, yeah, like, like, when I do this, like, I get in trouble, I get kicked out, I get sent to the principal's office. But when so-and-so does this, and they're not Black, they're white, they're like, they're just like a little slap on the wrist, nothing like big. And I'm like, okay. So we start breaking these situations down. They're like, why? But they know, but it's like, wait, damn, like, they really take it in, like, yo, what's happening here? And so these conversations, just sometimes they don't have these they have these sometimes obviously with their friends, but maybe they don't understand what's going on. They're like, why is this happening to me? And so, history is a really important thing. I mentioned this in the previous talks around, like, I used to hate talking about history, but we are now in the, the new Jim Crow era. And so these are conversations that we need to have with our young, our young Black, children and youth. And music, I would say, is the best way. I feel like a lot of, especially, I do work with a grassroots initiative that I'm one of the practitioners of, called Heart Base, and we use hip hop as a modality for healing. And so we take the lyrics from these songs and we have conversations. You can break down, talk about mental health. You could talk about anti-Black racism. A lot of these rappers talk about their experiences, and many youth can relate to that. And we can have conversations around that. How does that make you feel when you hear this line? How do you relate to this? Like, these are where we can really, come from and talk about these things, and really just get them to support them to articulate themselves, because sometimes they're not able to articulate what is actually going on, and music can kind of bridge that gap, or the arts can bridge that gap to have these conversations. So I say music is a great starting point. Movies, as some of us mentioned, film stories, these are great ways to have these conversations. So a lot of things, especially when it comes to when we have these conversations, I can't help but think about my experiences as a young child growing up in a predominantly white neighborhood, and my Blackness was challenged constantly. I couldn't be smart. I remember like people just saying to me, like, wait, you can't be a Black girl, like, you're smart. And I was like, what does that mean? I remember being like, why are they saying this to me? Like, what, Black people can't be smart? And having to challenge that, but not, if I knew what I knew now, oh my gosh. But I didn't understand, but I would still fight, but I didn't understand what was going on. Why were they putting me in this box? And a lot of you feel like they're being put in a box. Why are we being put in this box, right? And so when these murders happen, I just, like, it just brings me back. It just brings all the pain back, and it just, once again, like, it's like, oh my gosh, again, like, I don't know, like, will there be a change? I have no clue. It just leaves me in a place of numbness, just numb. So I'll leave it at that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you everyone for your, for your heartfelt, like, just really, those emotions that are so live and so kind of fraught and really fresh. but I feel like they're always so fresh, and, we talked about like, oh, how, do I know that I'm doing the right thing? Or, oh, this is what I think I should do. And that's all we can do, I think. And yeah, and the arts, I think or I know are very much an entry point. Working at the Art Gallery of Ontario, of course, we use art to have these entry points and it could be as simple as, what do you feel when you look at this painting? Really, that's it, and articulating, being able to articulate that, and there's no right or wrong, right? Like with art, there's no right or wrong. Like, and that's one of the many things I love about art forms. Like there is no right or wrong. It's your interpretation and your and you bring your lived experience into that interpretation. And I think I'd like to do, if we could go around. I am just conscious of time, and that was so full. And I think if we could go around, and I heard it a little bit, but I want to tease it out just a tiny bit more. If we could go around the screen, and I'd like to kind of end on a hope. On that term hope, what is it that you're hopeful for? And if you could, let's go around the screen. What do you hope for? What are you hopeful for? What do you wish, like, for perhaps the next generation? We may not see it, like, here. Hopefully we do see that change. But what are you hopeful for? And we could, in a sentence or two, what is it that you're hopeful for? Yeah, go ahead, Emmanuel.
Yeah, I'm hopeful that they have hope.
Mm,
That's what I'm hopeful for, right? Like hope could
yeah.
be, it's often killed at such a young age for so many Black kids, right? So I'm hoping that they live in a reality and a consciousness where they can continue to have hope, where they can dream freely and realize and truly believe that they can realize those dreams that they have for the world and that they've been brought into this world to have, right?
Mhm.
That's what I hope for.
Mm,
I think a few things that's coming up between folks talk at this idea of numbness, um, and I think I'm thinking about grieving, because every time this happens, like something happens, I feel as Black folks we have to do a vigil or we have to have a conversation and go into an action, and there's not really a space. I think this is a part of the healing process to create space for us to talk. But that point that I think Emmanuel brought up in terms of, and this is as someone who's working towards becoming a Black therapist that's working with Black folks, is like, what does healing look like? So my hope is healing, but how do we heal when the injury or the wound keeps on getting open? That suture that just keeps on getting ripped open. And I think my hope for my children is that there's some space in between so healing can happen, because it's hard to heal and it's hard
yeah.
to grieve fully. So I guess that's my hope, is the being able to heal some of these scars that's sort of happening.
Mhm.
I'm a huge proponent of therapy and and understanding or having someone guide me or teach me the language of healing, because I mean language is the operating system, of the mind. When we learn to name uh, things, when we learn to name feelings and understand patterns, uh, we can exert power. We don't feel as hopeless or as helpless in those moments. And so, like, when I've had that guidance, when I've had teachers, meditation teachers, instructors, therapists, um, work with me to identify, patterns, destructive patterns, painful patterns in my life, it's opened up a whole new way of seeing the world and a whole new space within my body for healing. And like, that's what I hope. I hope that every adult has that opportunity in some way or another to connect with that child, that unbroken inner child, that whatever period of time that was in one's life, where play and you know, just an innocence was. I don't think it's being naive to think that, or to imagine that in every one of us there's that moment of innocence, or the moment before our innocence was taken or lost. Like I want that for all my students. I want that for all the adults in my life. I look at my mom, who's, you know, of a certain generation where, you know, they didn't talk about feelings, they didn't talk about what it meant to be you know, immigrants and treated in a certain way here in Canada. Like, you know, my mom's still, you know, bows down to the queen and feels, you know, like it's very complicated. It's very complicated. I've had these conversations so often with my friends who have Caribbean parents who, you know, were in British colonies. Anyway, I hope for that. I think there's some real power in having access to that type of guidance and teaching, and really just doing the inner work to understand, and the practice of self-compassion. Because you know, I'm starting to think something Emmanuel said about, you know, the scars and the wound, and Brandon said the same thing. Like, what if, I don't want to sound pessimistic, but what if it's not about healing? What if life is about the ways in which we tend to the wound, and like, it's not about that wound healing at any point? Like, is that is that where we're at? And is that pessimistic to say? Is it pessimistic to think that we have to play hurt, that we have to go through life and play with this wound? But knowing that there are communities and people and practices that help us tend to that wound, to know that the wound isn't going to be all consuming, that it's not going to be the end of us, that it's not going to result in us having to cut off a limb. Like, I don't know. I don't know where we're at, but I don't know. Part of me just wonders if the wound is here to stay, and if our work to do is in how we tend to it, how we tend to our brothers' wounds and our sisters' wounds. I don't know.
I can jump off from there. I think I really like that, Lori, because I think there's been, you know, in the last couple of years, there's been, you know, Floyd, January 6th, the racial uprisings, and I've taught throughout the last 2 years, every term, even in the summer. And, you know, there's just some days it's just so pointless to like go with what the lecture was supposed to be. I'm like, I don't got anything for y'all, but we're just gonna read some poetry. We're gonna listen to some Black folk singing, and we're just gonna go from there, right? Because I think that's sometimes all we can do. Yeah. And I tell my students, even the young ones, um, being numb in the wake of this doesn't mean you're not feeling anything. So like, not knowing what you're feeling is not the same as not feeling anything, right? So we'll figure this out together. And that's where I find hope in the practices of community that we have, right? I tell students always, community is a verb. So that's where I find hope. I find hope that when we commune, we can get through stuff, even hard stuff. And then in those spaces, we come to decisions that maybe this world is just not it. And we're gonna make another one. So I find hope in the history of Black struggle that has always been about making new worlds and tending to each other's wounds. So I've been I'm only kept whole as much as I'm whole because of the practices of community I've learned from other Black people and Indigenous people and racialized folks and my elders and those long before me. So that's where I find hope and survival in a sense that if we don't see it, our kids and kids will, that we're gonna make a different world, because this one cannot hold us. This is not enough. So that's where I find hope, in a new world and revolution.
And I'll jump off of that. I love this, what you say about community, you know, in thinking about those conversations with students about this history. We also get to this place where we're thinking about now what Black folks have had to do to learn about ourselves and to build knowledge and to share joy. When it comes to hope, you know, I find that I can remain hopeful in the sense that I know that part of that strength comes because I carry the blood of my ancestors. But in that, I feel like we've all found each other. So, thinking again about this notion of community, this is hope. We're looking at hope because everyone in this space is working with kids to provide love, care, advocacy, self-empowerment, and love, and love, and love. Right? Like, I'm hopeful because there's so many of us who continue to do this work, right? To connect with the youth in a way that they too understand that strength in the blood of their ancestors and how it is that it can, empower them. That doesn't mean that they're not allowed to feel the pain or they're not given space to feel the pain, but to know that there's love surrounding them as they feel it. And we have this shared experience, and with so many members of our community offering guidance. So many of our elders offering guidance in how it is that we can build ourselves. So it's hard to remain hopeful, but I'm not hopeless.
I was gonna say I hope for folks to find, ways to cope that work for them, and to once again just find, spaces to express themselves, and to really, not to be alone in these moments, and to really, band together with, loved ones and, folks in the community. I also hope for folks to really check themselves. And when I mean, unlearn and relearn, I think that work needs to happen on an individual basis as well. Racism is taught, so it needs to start from a very young age. So people really need to check themselves. So I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. And I'm hopeful for a better world for our babies, and I hope for that radical love that Bell Hooks talks about, and love as a revolutionary practice. Like really, that's what I hope for. That's why I can do the work that I do. I do see these small shifts that do happen, and but I absolutely believe like the arts are. I was listening to a lecture of Vanessa German, this artist, and she was talking about new models for social healing, and the arts as the center of that. And so I really think that understanding how we can help, and perhaps the wound it does remain open, but how can we perhaps work around it or work with it through it. I think that's my hope. This energy that we all bring to and finding community. I think we all said that it's like, finding community and holding each other. This idea, this notions of care are so important in these times, yes, but just on the everyday, just on the daily, on your walk into work, on your, in your nature walk, or your, out with your family, out with your friends, like that care. So holding each other really close all the time, really. So, and that's what I was hoping for when we convened together here. I was really, I just wanted to hold everyone super close at this time. So thank you for being with me today. And audiences, I trust that you learned, an incredible amount from all the speakers that you have on screen here, and in what you're hearing, what you're reading. So please do the work of unlearning and learning again. And that hope of taking steps forward together is real. And now, if we could take a few moments just to say the names. Don't forget to say the names of the victims. Their lives were taken at unjust moments, and these are through violent acts of racism. So saying, Trayvon Martin, saying, Sandra Bland, like really, let's say the names of the victims that the most recent victims, at least that we perhaps know of, and then we will end there. And I thank you for joining us today. And here's an image. This is from a media source, a collage, an art piece that an artist put together of all the victims that from Buffalo, New York, at the supermarket. So Yep, if you want to join me, Roberta A. Drury, 32. Margus D.
Morrison.
52. Andre
Andre
McNeil,
McNeil.
53.
53.
Aaron Salter,
Aaron Salter.
55.
55.
Geraldine Talley,
Talley.
62.
62.
Celestine
Celestina
Cheney,
65.
65.
Hayward
Hayward
Patterson,
Patterson
67.
67.
Catherine
Catherine
Macy,
Massey
72.
72.
Pearl
Pearl
Young,
Earl
Young
Young.
77.
77.
Ruth
Ruth
Whitfield,
Ruth Whitfield.
86.
86.
Yeah, thank you all. Thank you for joining us out there. Thank you again. The most gratitude to my panel for having this conversation and holding the space for one another in such such a loving, such a caring way. Thank you all, and do take good care of each other. Bye-bye.